Welcome to Good News Baltimore, your source for progressive information. Starting off this episode is an organization that is changing its community inside and out, providing job training, community engagement, housing, and fatherhood advocacy. It's easy to understand why they are known as the Center for Urban Families.
The vision for the Center for Urban Family is a part of my journey. You know, I'm a firm believer that fate often determines your destiny, but it's your faith that helps you endure the journey.
What happens at the Center for Urban Families? We propel people to the stage in their life that empowers them to change it. All of our programs help people understand that life is not about what you've done, but it's about what you're going to do.
I did a lot. Storage time.
And so our strategic vision for going forward is based off of that mission, which is what we call family stability and economic success. And that is, if you can come off the street, regardless of your circumstance, and we can get you stable and get you into the labor market, then we can help you to acquire the additional education or some kind of career credential where you can increase your marketability, your mobility within the labor force. You can move up the wage scale, that you can become stable within terms of your housing situation, including home ownership, and then you can transfer that along with financial education to your children so that your children are growing up healthy, consistently in school, have parental participation, and that over time, from a longitudinal standpoint, we can make a dent and a deeper impact in Baltimore, and then we want to export what we learn across the country for other nonprofits to be able to learn how to do what we do.
We want to break down those old behaviors and build them back up with some new workforce development behaviors that will work for them in the workplace. Employers are looking for individuals that have the right attitude, and by going through the STRIDE program, you will most certainly develop a level of self-esteem that will make you a qualified candidate for any employer.
How you doing, good sir? Not too bad. All right, Travis and I are going down to Camden Yards to play baseball. What's wrong with this picture? What happened? What happened? Okay, so why didn't you do that ahead of time? If you could do it in 15 minutes, why didn't you do it from the beginning?
Procrastination. That was on me. I think responsibility on that shit for the game.
So you ready to play the game all day, every day, just like this?
Yeah.
Good, sit down. You're gonna give me a 500-word essay too on property tie. Need that by Monday, 8:30. Thank you.
No problem.
Those who are not ready come back and do it again. So there's no easy passes. You know, we've had people do the cohort for as much as 3 or 4 times. Cohort in and of itself is based on attrition and competition.
These kinds of things set many inner city men in a class by themselves. While we can see many of these practices and how men present themselves and how they act, some of them are thinking patterns that set a man up for self-defeat.
This curriculum was developed in-house with Center for Urban Families in partnership with Columbia University. Each cohort topics consist of responsibility of fatherhood, where we address all your child support barriers, needs, resources, and any other issues that you may have on an individual basis that can help you move forward with being a better manager of your child support case and having more awareness on how and where to go to address these issues to move forward, especially when you gain employment. The other one is parenting, as it relates to fatherhood and being more involved as a parent. Cohort is based on that. The other cohort is healthy relationships.
It's interesting that when we work with folks who come into the center and they have multiple barriers, you know, from child support from substandard housing, in some cases being homeless, to substance abuse, to having been in the criminal justice system. They paid their debt to society, but they come out and now they got a criminal record, which makes it exceedingly hard for them to get employment versus somebody who doesn't have a criminal record. And in an economy that's still depressed, it makes it 10 times harder for them to get a job. So a part of what we are obligated to do is look at policy issues that prevent our people from being successful beyond what they can do in a program, right? There are certain things that you cannot program your way out of, right? And so you have to have a lens towards policy advocacy, and you can't do that in a vacuum. We have 3 zip codes in our immediate area, 21215, 21216, and 21217, with 21217 being where our building is located. There's approximately 2,400 men who owe $20+ million in back child support. So if you just look at that as a microcosm of what happens across the city, we have so many men who are underground by this debt. And working with our state legislators and our Maryland State Department of Human Resources, we've been able to come up with a reform effort that ties into Maryland House Bill 333 that says we want the couple to be together at the time that the woman goes into the welfare office, and we want to create an opportunity for the guy to get a job. Just as we're asking the mom to go from welfare to work, we're asking the guy to be engaged in the life of his child with his partner and to get into the labor force. And then we want to support the 2 of them through this couples advancing together model, which is a part of this legislation.
I look at it this way. We're the Center for Urban Families. We're in the heart of the community. You can't get any further into the community than we are. I know that we help fathers. I know that we help women. And if we help the parents, that it'll help the children. I love watching our clients grow. It's nothing better than it to see somebody that hasn't done anything in their life do something totally different. It's like a gift.
It's no secret that people love cars that are fast, sleek, and luxurious. But what about eco-friendly? Now there's a car that has all of the above, and it runs on salt water. Cars have been the primary means for transportation in the U.S. for decades. If you've ever been stuck in traffic, you know there are a lot of cars on the road. Car industries, average people, and now the government are starting to realize the impact of traditional fuel on the environment, not to mention the limited resources it takes to make the fuel. It's simple. More cars equal more CO2 emissions. CO2 is one of the most common greenhouse gases, and transportation creates over 30% of that. The big change in the auto industry came with electric cars. Unfortunately, most car buyers have not jumped on the bandwagon just yet. Even though electric cars are great, there are still some setbacks. Like if an electric car's battery is completely dead, it can take roughly 1 to 8 hours to charge, depending on the car and charging station. And let's not forget that electricity has to come from somewhere, which is most likely a nuclear or coal power plant. So what's the solution to finding a car that has the look, feel, is eco-friendly, and doesn't take forever to charge? Well, thanks to the engineers at NanoFlow Cell, we have the answer. Introducing the Quant eSports Limousine. This is a luxury electric sports car that's powered by salt water. This new design mimics the technology that's used for hydrogen fuel, but uses salt water to charge the battery where the energy is stored. In this case, salt water passes through a membrane in between the 2 tanks, creating electric charge. This electricity is then stored and distributed by supercapacitors. The 4 motors in the car are fed electricity, which makes it run. The car carries the water in 2 200-liter tanks to allow drivers to travel up to 373 miles in just one sitting. Europe has approved this car for use on public roads, and the Quant is now in mass production. Currently, there are plans for this technology to be used on less expensive cars and products in the near future. If you're wondering how you can get your hands on a car like that, you can't until people start requesting and buying more environmentally safe cars. So start now by assessing the green facts of a new car before making your big purchase. Look for car models with high mileage, low emissions, and alternative fuel that also match your budget. By doing this collectively, we can force the car industry to move a little faster towards this change. This new green technology helps the planet by completely diminishing carbon emissions that pollute the air. What more can you ask for in a car that charges super fast, is eco-friendly, and let's face it, looks pretty amazing? When you think about it, this could be the start of something big. What do you think? What should be the next stage in transportation technology? Follow us at GMB Updates and let us know your thoughts. For links and more information on this, go to goodnewsbaltimore.org.
Making a name for yourself locally has its challenges, but Grammy-nominated singer-songwriter Deborah Bond is making her way around the globe. Follow us as she takes G&D beyond the music in this artist interview.
Psychedelic disco funk. So it's a fusion of what I do is just honestly a fusion of all of the influences that myself and my production team, Third Logic, have been influenced by. I mean, we all come from different musical backgrounds and we all have loves for so many different styles of music that when we come together to create, we just fuse it all. So, you know, I'm a big funk head, I'm a big disco head, I'm a big R&B person. So I bring that to the table. I love really soulful singers. Then I have producers in my unit that come from the classical background, from the go-go background, from the gospel background, from the rock background. And since we're just musical people and we just love music so much that we don't really give ourselves any limit or boundaries when it comes to how we create. So I can honestly say it could go all kinds of ways. It's not just psychedelic disco funk. It could be psychedelic disco funk, soul, rock, gypsy, whatever you want, you know, just music. Yeah, progressive stuff, pushing the limit.
And I'm so grateful to God for connecting the moon and stars.
I really, more than anything else, hope that the messages in my lyrics come forward. I am a lyricist at heart. I love reading lyrics. I love how powerful words can be. So the number one thing is the message, because several songs I just want people to feel, you know, that they can understand and relate, and that maybe I gave them some encouragement or hope or whatever they're feeling, that I can touch them in that way. And music is a healer. Music is healing. So when you see myself in my unit, I want to have you feel good. I want you to leave like, that was cool. I'm all right today. You know what I mean? I want you to be entertained, like all of the leaders and legends that entertained me all of my life. So for the most part, it's a combination of the message and the power of healing that can come through music. And I've had so many beautiful conversations with people where they have said some things like, you know, your song got me through the loss of my father, your song got me through this, or, you know, I wake up and I put this song on, it just starts my day off. That kind of stuff to me is priceless. It's better than a Grammy, it's better than, you know, a tour for thousands of people. When someone personally tells me that my music helped heal them or inspire them or move them, it's just like I could almost cry thinking about it. So that to me is where I feel my purpose is to touch people in that way. Being in Connecticut, it's funny, you know, people think Connecticut, they think trees and rich people, but New Haven is actually quite the opposite. And I grew up with, a very loud and funny family that played a lot of funk music. I had a lot of P-Funk around me, a lot of Stevie Wonder and stuff like that. When I moved to DC, DC is honestly where my music really came to life. I began to search and find myself musically in the DC area. When I moved to DC in '94, it was this, neo soul was thriving for one thing. You had D'Angelo, you had Badu, you had Amel LaRue, all of these amazing artists. And then I moved to this city that people might think is just a political city. You might associate DC with politics, but I met the most amazing musicians here. And especially when I began to explore myself as an artist, it was just like the scene was just thriving with bands. And I grew up listening to bands. So, of course, that's what I wanted to be. And I didn't want to be this solo person in the forefront. I wanted to be a part of a band where we get together, we practice and we write together. And I was very blessed to, very early on in my career, to find a unit of brothers that are just talented and they get me. And they also get the fact that I love music, and one minute you might hear me blasting some Stevie Wonder, and the next minute you might hear me blasting Bjork or Seal or whoever, Jean-Luc Ponty, So they got that about me, and they were the ones that kind of introduced me to a lot of my favorite UK singers. Jamiroquai is one of our favorite bands, and they were the ones that were like, you gotta check this band out. And I was always an Incognito fan, so it's from Connecticut was like the root and the foundation, and DC kind of was where the blossoming began, and then the petals and the roots kind of went all over across the pond, So it's been a really cool journey with everyone so far, and for me, I'm like a traveling spirit, so I hope to let my music take me all kinds of places.
Deborah Bond is coming right back with her band to shut the stage down with a musical performance. But for now, let's keep the music going while we look at the history of jazz in our city as we go inside Baltimore.
For nearly 40 years, local Baltimore clubs, night spots, and cabarets hosted many of the world's most noted jazz musicians and pioneers. Sunday evenings from 5 to 9 at the famous ballroom in Charm City was a must for the likes of Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Donald Byrd, Art Blakey, Wynton Marsalis, and John Coltrane, to name a few. Jazz greats couldn't wait to test their chops or introduce new techniques in Baltimore, which had always been a proving ground for jazz artists. But in 1964, the proving ground was transformed into a world-class performance town thanks to a small, unassuming handful of local jazz enthusiasts known collectively as the Left Bank Jazz Society.
We started out doing our Sunday shows because a lot of times musicians would be in New York. It would be a down day from playing on the weekends. And we would tell them, look, would you rather stay in New York and spend $300 or come to Baltimore and make $200? And then the word got out that we had one of the hippest audiences in the nation.
It was 47 Sundays a year. We only laid out between Christmas and the Super Bowl. We never sold advance tickets. You only bought tickets at the door. There were Sundays when there were lines around the corner. Nowhere else did they do a concert where we had 3 sets. People just loved the atmosphere.
The gimmicks didn't work. You had to come down here and play. And when you got a standing ovation at the ballroom, you have truly played your instrument.
The founding members took the name Left Bank in honor of a region of Paris, France, known for its jazz scene and lively culture. In the beginning, the organization was mainly focused on promoting jazz as an art form through organized activities and concerts. What started out as a simple plan soon grew to immense proportions. Longtime Left Bank members Mildred Battle and John Fowler believed that there was something special about Baltimore that made Left Bank so appealing.
musicians wanted to play for us so much that they didn't charge us as much as they did in other places.
A lot of the spreading of the word was from the musicians who would come back and say, man, I had a great time in Baltimore. I got fed, I got free drinks, you know, I met a girl, I got paid, and the audience was hip.
We were able to bring to Baltimore the best, the meanest jazz musicians in the world.
Once the word really spread among the musicians in New York and Philly, it's not a problem in getting musicians. And again, we never, ever, ever, in our wildest imagination, thought that this thing would last for 40-some years. But it did. It just kept rolling.
John Tegler, local jazz radio host, historian, and aficionado, remembers those Sunday sessions and reflects on what Left Bank did for jazz in Baltimore.
What they did for Baltimore and jazz, a whole lot. A lot more than many other things that happened or are even happening right now. This was a place where people that loved the music could gather, regardless of who they were. And it grew. Where I remember concerts where you couldn't get in the door if you didn't already have a reservation, etc. And that kind of exposure is the thing that I'm talking about. Left Bank provided that. I wish it was still here. I really do.
The Left Bank Jazz Society emerged at a time when Baltimore was still a segregated city and deeply divided. The movement around jazz in Baltimore helped foster racial sensitivity and understanding that far exceeded the doors of the famous ballroom.
Whites, blacks, you name it, everybody came to the ballroom on Sunday for one purpose, and that was to listen to live music and have a good time. Left Bank Jazz Society itself was an interracial group. There were African Americans, there were Caucasians in the membership, so we had a real cross-section. We booked a cross-section. We booked the Maynard Ferguson Band. We booked Woody Herman, Stan Kenton, you name them, we booked them. If they were hot, we booked them. In 42 years of putting on concerts, thousands of concerts, never had one major argument, never had one fight.
If y'all just wait a minute and hush up, I'm gonna play something.
They knew their history, they knew their music, and their appreciation showed.
In 2000, the Left Bank Jazz Society landed a deal to have its taped archive called Live at the Left Bank made into a series of CD releases. In 4 decades, the Left Bank Jazz Society grew from a meeting space above a bar to an internationally recognized and respected jazz institution. For Good News Baltimore, I'm Anthony Truitt.
Lead poisoning is a huge issue in Baltimore City, and it has been for really the entire time that the city has existed.
Lead poisoning basically is an exposure to an environmental toxin or a poison that your child could be exposed to through lead paint, through cultural cosmetics that may have been used, medications, and it can cause injury to their brain.
A house that's built before 1978 is going to have still an 80% or higher chance that there's lead paint somewhere in the house. And the reason for this is that the lead industry 100 years ago was very strongly pushing lead-based paint as good paint. And the tragedy is the lead industry at the time knew that lead could poison children.
So a child can be exposed to lead by the smallest amount. It would be comparable to about 3 to 5 granules of sugar being eaten each day. When the lead level goes up, It goes into the body by them either putting it directly into their mouth or breathing in lead dust. Lead is microscopic. You can't look at a windowsill and say, oh, this is dust, this is pollen, this is a dust bunny, and here's the lead. You can't separate it out that way.
I was diagnosed with lead poisoning around the age of 3 or 4.
I didn't find out till years later that I had it. I was in high school when I first found out I had it.
Long-term effects on their cognitive ability. They have decreased math skills, they may have an increase in dropout rate when they get a little bit older in school. During that time, we often find that they have presented signs of aggressive behavior, or they just can't stay on task.
My nephew Darnell in school, it was pretty hard for him. We tried to get him in several programs like Job Corps, couldn't complete that. GED program, couldn't get through that. So when we was younger, he definitely had an anger problem. He was real aggressive.
His attitude, like he used to always want to fight.
Coming up, you wouldn't even think that he had an issue or a problem. You just thought it was a typical child being a child. But as he got older, you know, zap out, spaz out. Like you can just look at him wrong and he'd go off.
I would take things probably like a little too far, like something that caused it called for a reaction, but it's not the reaction that I gave, like fighting, cursing people out, like really bad, just doing things impulsively.
The main law that controls lead poisoning cases, and back then it did and now it still does, is the Baltimore City Housing Code. It comes down to whether, if there is an insurance company, you can make a settlement with the insurance company. If you can't make a settlement, then you have to put the case on in front of the jury. And the jury decides how much money the child should get. And so the two parts of that decision are pain and suffering, which includes everything that a child goes through who has lead poisoning.
I'm compensated so when I turned 18, my mother set mine up a lot differently than a lot of people's was set up. So when I turned 18, I had got a lump sum, and every other year after that, I get a lump sum.
This whole process of Darnell getting his money was to provide for his family. You know, before he even got his money, our mom passed. So now that this guy that was once the same level as the next guy that ain't had nothing, now he's a target because everybody know that he have this money.
As far as the lump sum goes, I received one big amount at one time, but in my opinion, I don't think any amount of compensation could take away the lead poisoning.
The length of time that lead stays in the bone can be decades. This can last for 20, 40, 60 years. Tests have been showing that when they do autopsies on people that are in their 80s, they've actually seen lead still in their brain cells and on their hair follicles.
Other than those guys who are getting paid to say lead doesn't cause an injury, now just about any doctor you talk to will say no child should have lead in their blood. It's going to cause damage at the cellular level.
Welcome back to Good News Baltimore. Today we sit down with one of the area's most dedicated advocates for the creation of healthy homes, Ruth Ann Norton. Ruth Ann Norton serves as president and CEO of Healthy Homes Initiative, and we're excited to dive into a conversation with her about the national and local issue of lead poisoning. Thank you for being with us today.
Oh, delighted to be here.
Well, let me just dive right into my first question. We spoke a little earlier about Maryland being one of the country's leading states when it comes to lead poisoning. Can you elaborate on some of the different avenues that come into play where people can actually be exposed to lead poisoning?
Yep, it used to be that Baltimore was the #1 city in the United States for the concentration of childhood lead poisoning. Just outside of where we are today, you could walk in any direction and have children with extraordinarily high levels of lead. But if you go into a home and see paint that looks like alligator skin, that you can crack, you can chip, it's almost assuredly lead-based paint. Older windows that go up and down create a lead dust that gets on a child's hands and into their mouth. That can come from doors that rub, it can come from chipping paint on a porch. But the net effect is it takes about 3 granules of sugar, the equivalent of that, of leaded dust to start to poison a child. And here's what that means to their brains. The sodium and creatine levels increase the same way that men who abuse steroids, right? That stories of violent behavior. Well, the same things start to happen to kids, except for it's way more dangerous on younger children. And what the result is reading disabilities, hearing loss, speech delays, but also aggressive and violent behavior. Kids who get poisoned by lead, they grow up and are often lost because they cannot compete in the classroom, they can't stay in a conversation, they have a quicker fuse. They're actually 7 times more likely to drop out of school. And all of this is unacceptable because every bit of it is preventable.
Right, well, let me ask you this. If a child is affected by lead poisoning versus an adult, what's the difference in how, those effects can manifest themselves?
Well, it's a bit of a dose response. It takes more lead ingestion into our system. But if I'm an adult today, and I am, exposed to lead poisoning or lead hazards, and I ingest that, it will increase my rate of kidney failure 8-fold. My potential for cardiac arrest and cardiac disease by 16 to 19%, and I have a 46% chance of early mortality because it stores in our bones, in our brains, and it can come back and re-leach in lots of situations in our life.
Right. Well, obviously it requires a lot of medical attention, and in order to get that medical attention that you need by something that is a liability that you did not cause on your own, how long does it take to really get the compensation for maybe a libel suit?
It can often be years, and depends on the circumstances. They could be suing a landlord who's hiding behind a limited liability corporation who keeps 0 assets, has no insurance, and will be unlikely to recover. But we've also seen, as in the city of Baltimore, the Housing Authority of Baltimore City was sued and has now settled a number of their cases. So that answer, unfortunately, I don't have a great answer because it's all over the board. And the truth of the matter is most children poisoned by lead never receive any compensation for the damage that's done.
Those that do receive compensation, how important is it for us to educate them on using that compensation for medical treatment versus monetary gain?
Well, I think that again, there's very limited medical treatment, and once you are 16, 17, 18, and if that compensation is from when you were 2, 3, 4, there is literally nothing on a medical intervention that can be done. And I would tell you, Ashley, that I think one of the saddest days of my work has been when I was visited by a federal public defender for a young man who was being prosecuted for murder, and he had serious lead poisoning. And I also think about the Dawson family bombing, and the young man who firebombed that house and 5 people died had a history of just terribly high lead poisoning. And people over time really tried to help him, and yet we could not get under control that impulse. So we've paid a heavy price in this city, in cities across the country, and in places across the country, and we keep paying that price. And it's almost as if we can't get it right about guns, and we can't get it right about lead poisoning, and yet it's staring us right in the face to say, do this, and there's a better path over here. I do think one of the things that we ought to do is really do better counseling on use of that money to get better housing and allow families whose children have been awarded money to be able to use that money to buy a home so that we don't have generational poisoning or other siblings getting poisoned. So, early intervention matters, prevention matters here, because actually prevention is the only cure for lead poisoning. It's quite sad that there's not some, magic medication that we can do that would make people better. It's just not there.
You mentioned earlier that children who are lead poisoned have a 7 times more chance of dropping out of school. But they're also 6 times more likely to become involved in the juvenile justice system. What's your overall stance on this issue?
I have long wondered where the outrage is that we kind of send kids down this path that we know if we don't improve their housing, if we don't really aggressively care about the health of a house that a child is growing up in, we pay for it. We all pay for it by the loss of opportunity, by the cost of incarceration, by the cost of special education. But where you find lead-based paint issues, you're likely also going to find issues that are causing kids to have asthma, the #1 reason kids are missing school. It's a reason parents don't go to work because their kids are in the emergency room and not the classroom. We couple that with lead poisoning and we send kids to the classroom when they can get there, and they can't read as well.
So this is clearly a major epidemic, right? So these kids are coming into the schools, they're dealing with some issues around their reading and their learning. Is there any type of training sensitivity that takes place in the public school system that can help kind of get these kids moving along in the right direction?
Well, there is testing. So now we require to, when you go into the public school system, when you go into child care, when you go into preschool in Maryland, you must prove that your child was tested for lead if they live in an at-risk community. Teachers in special education and other programs are made aware of what to look for, but there is very little that can be done once the damage has occurred, even with the most amount of care.
Okay, Ruth Ann, could you elaborate a little more on how lead-based poisoning can actually affect the crime rates in our area?
Well, I can tell you that our jails are currently filled with young men and some young women that have been poisoned by lead. Yet, what people often think of with lead poisoning is reading disabilities. It's kind of been stuck on that. And in fact, we probably have a much greater issue with violent behavior. And, it was in the end of the 1990s, we had a police chief by the name of Thomas Frazier and the state attorney, Patricia Jessamy, and they both came to me together and said that they were tired of prosecuting in the juvenile court young people with histories of lead poisoning. And they helped us to get enforcement put in when Martin O'Malley became mayor and to reinstate enforcement of lead violations.
Wow. You have led the efforts in Maryland to reduce childhood lead poisoning by 98%. That is awesome. And you've helped develop 27 pieces of state and local legislation to prevent lead poisoning and create healthier homes. What statewide mandates and compliance requirements should property owners be aware of?
So if you own a property now before 1978, effective January of this year, we've expanded it to all rental properties 1978, you must have your home meet the standards required by the Maryland Lead Risk Reduction in Housing Law. So no chipping, peeling, flaking paint, those structural issues that cause that. You must have, and all of that work must be done in a lead safe manner. The house must pass a lead dust clearance test. You have to provide education, and families have a right of redress if these things fail during their tenancy. We are also implementing a law in Maryland that for repair and renovation and painting contractors, when they disturb lead-based paint in any home of any income level, rental or homeowner occupied properties, they too must pass a lead dust clearance test if it's more than, I think, 2 square feet.
So, Ruth Ann, many people may think lead poisoning is something of the past. Can you please address how important and truly toxic this issue is today?
Yeah, and toxic's the right word. I mean, we're living with the toxic legacy of lead-based paint. You know, in 1904, the board of directors of Sherwin-Williams said that they did not want to get into the lead-based paint business because it poisoned kids and that kids would die from it. And in 1908, they entered the market. I talked about the fact that the federal government mandated the use of lead-based paint, and it was used in very low-income housing and very wealthy housing because it was a durable paint. So it stayed in houses for decades before it became dangerous. And what we are living with are the choices made decades ago that are poisoning young kids today, and it's pervasive in over 85% of the housing stock in the city of Baltimore. It will be a long time before we can say that we have no lead-based paint. So we really have to be diligent and vigilant about how we maintain housing, to replace as many windows as we can, and to make sure that we support people in having housing that has at its heart a health-based standard and really prevents lead poisoning and asthma and those things that we can avoid such damage and cost. We spend $100 billion a year between lead poisoning and asthma on avoidable cost. That wouldn't we like to put that into a child's to education and innovation and development in communities that really need it.
Now, you lead a wonderful organization and initiative around green and healthy homes. What type of education does your organization provide homeowners, maybe even healthcare providers overall?
We try to get every healthcare provider in the city and in the region to refer us their children who have elevated blood lead levels or who they know families are living in older housing with poor housing conditions or unhealthy housing conditions. We go in and provide a comprehensive assessment. We look at energy efficiency, lead issues, asthma issues, health and safety issues in the home, and then we go in and fix houses, looking at those issues, and have received funding from the state, city, and foundations to do that. So we are on a path to create a revolution around healthy housing in America.
Wonderful. Now, how could I or how could someone in the community get involved to assist with lead poisoning prevention?
Well, we love volunteer advocates who do training in the community. We love the referrals for families that we can try to work with. 410-534-6477, or go on our website, which is www.greenandhealthyhomes.org or ghhi.org.
Wonderful. So Ruth Ann, after today, I really hope that we can get more people on the bandwagon to get behind the lead poisoning prevention. I know that I will. I'm very much interested, and now our viewers hopefully are in tune as well. So.
Well, we need all the help that we can possibly garner, and it's an important issue, and I appreciate that, so thank you very much.
And thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back with Good News Baltimore. Thanks for joining us. Let's keep the conversation going.
Share your thoughts on today's episode by liking us on Facebook and following us on Twitter at GMB Updates.
Now sit back and enjoy the performance by Deborah Bond.
It's just another day. Been steady on the grind. About to have a cigarette so I can ease my mind. just want to thank you for tuning in. Thank you. I just want to thank you. Can't believe I'm here. Can't believe I'm here. I can't believe I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. Where we at? Can't believe. Where we at, y'all? We on good